Hi, everybody. We don't have a microphone in this room. I hope that doesn't present a problem for anybody. If you need to switch seats or come to the front, we understand. We'll try to project to fill the space. My name is Katie Aronoff. I'm the moderator for our panel discussion about From Theory to Practice, exploring the impact of AI. This is the Clarivate session, for those of you who might be wondering. So we'll just jump right into the panel here. You may remember that last year we presented an AI update, I think just down the hall in the next room over, that was quite well attended and I think generated a lot of interesting conversation. I was thinking as we were preparing for this session that this is almost the companion session to last year's Clarivate AI update. There's been a lot that has happened in the last year in terms of what we have built and been able to implement. There's also a lot that we have done with the library community to get feedback and do some really interesting work to understand the best use cases for technology like this, how it can be implemented in practice, how it's productive, cases where we might want to be a little bit more careful about implementing things. So we'll hear about that today, and I really do want to encourage you to think of this as an installment in an ongoing story that we will be sharing across several years at Charleston. So I'm going to sit down. We have kind of an awkward setup here, so I hope you can all see and hear us. Oh, okay, great. So let's start, Oren, with you. I'm really interested to hear, one of the things that we have done at Clarivate over the last year or so is define what we are calling academic AI as distinct from more general purpose AI. I'm wondering if you can share with us, what does that mean? What are the differences between academic AI and general use AI?
Yeah, thanks, Katie. And, hello, everyone. Pleased to be here. So I think, we know that Gen AI technologies offer really some amazing, opportunities and capabilities, but also we know that they introduce some very valid concerns, and we hear, from many of you about those concerns. And I would like to say, there are different types of concerns, and we may touch on some of them in this conversation. But one main concern is about the quality and the integrity of Gen AI applications. And what happened, I think, in November of 22 with the emergence of ChatGPT is that it became really, everybody is aware of it. Almost everyone is using it or has used it. And we're encountering a lot of cases in which, there are hallucinations, made up facts, and certainly some other elements, bias, etc. So, with that in mind, it was clear to us that in order to introduce AI in academia, we need to build trust in it. We need to do, a few things in order to create that trust. So our approach is really to benefit the tremendous opportunities and capabilities of Gen AI. Large language models is one, of the models that support generative AI, not the only one. But also recognizing the concerns, and particularly that around the quality and the integrity. It's important to recognize the fact that certainly in the case of the LLM, when you ask a question through ChatGPT, the answer that you get is based on the knowledge base of that model, and that knowledge base is in many cases based on web stuff. Certainly not the trusted, authoritative, curated stuff that many libraries are trying to bring into their institutions and users. So what we're doing is ensuring that we take the capabilities of the Gen AI, but apply it, or to use a more technical term, ground it in scholarly content, trusted, authoritative, reliable, curated content. So I'm talking here about applying, for example, in tools like Web of Science Research Assistant, applying this generative AI capabilities on the content, on the core collection of Web of Science. Same for ProQuest Research Assistant. This is applied on the ProQuest curated content. Same for Primo, for those of you who use that. This is grounded on the Primo CDI content, Alma catalogs, etc. So that's a big important part of what we're doing. We're basically taking the best of both worlds, the Gen AI capabilities, but applying it on trusted and curated content that reduces, significantly, those problems that I mentioned before. But there is more. It goes beyond that. This is really about ensuring that we implement AI within the boundaries of what we consider responsible, for academic use. So, by doing what I said earlier, by the way, it's called RAG, retrieval augmented generation, we ensure that we don't train the AI. A lot of people are concerned about information feeding back into the large language model. It doesn't happen in our academic AI framework. But in addition to that, adhering to academic standards, rigorous standards of security, of privacy, of quality assurance. There's a big question of how do you test generative AI with a lot of focus on that. Transparency, which I think is key to many institutions. So all that is part of what we consider academic AI. I want to add to that just two quick components. One, I think for us, academic AI is not just technology. It's also about becoming really a center of excellence for education, for advocating for AI within, the academic boundaries of what we consider to be in line with academic and research integrity. So this is about education. This is about digital literacy in our age. Things like prompt engineering. We'll probably get to this later. All this is included in what we consider to be academic AI. And I think the last point I'll make is what's academic AI for us as well is that it is really distributed across use cases. I think ChatGPT introduced to the whole world this notion of chat-based discovery, but there are really plenty of other use cases that cut across teaching and learning, research, library operation, that will help, I think, do four things: enhance, current library tasks and roles. So using Gen AI, for example, for research discovery. Two is to increase productivity. And this is both about efficiency and being of scale. I think three, AI, academic AI, can help with supporting strategic decision making. As well as the fourth, and perhaps the most exciting, is that I think with Gen AI in academic setting, we can do new things that we couldn't do before. So really transform roles of libraries to start being more integrated in some other mission-critical processes in the respective institutions. So the application of that academic AI is wide and broad in the context of academic education. So,
great. You had said something about transparency, and I want to turn to you for the second question. This is something we hear quite a bit about, the importance of transparency and sometimes the lack of transparency in how AI tools are generating their outputs. I think in an academic setting, people are especially concerned about this. And I'm wondering what thoughts you could share with us about the critical importance of transparency in an academic AI tool.
So I'm Eva Ligon. I work at Brown University Library, and I work on research, teaching, and learning initiatives across the library. So that kind of informs my perspective. And I think there's such like a long list, so this is not exhaustive because there's so many reasons that this transparency is very, very important in this context. I think the first one Oren touched on, which is questions around privacy and data security. And I think, in conversations I've had with Clarivate and a lot of other vendors, I feel pretty good about the way that they're addressing this question. But users, especially staff, faculty, are very, very concerned about this. So that transparency, it's not enough for it to be transparent to librarians. We have to help our users feel confident in that. But I think in addition to that, a very big concern has to do with reproducibility. This is the core of research and understanding how are these tools impacting reproducibility. It's a really, really central question for us. And I think related to that is just a broader question of researcher responsibility. What is your responsibility for the information that you discover or manipulate or analyze using AI? How as a researcher, how much do you know about that process so that you can feel confident that you are responsible for the results of your research. So I think that's still a question that we have a lot of work to figure out. What's the role of libraries, what's the role of vendors, what's the role of publishers in that question. And then I think I have a third one, let's see what it was. Oh yeah, I think then the other side of that is closely related, which is just the intense interest in applying computational methods across a range of research tasks. We're seeing this, you know, this is one of the reasons why the library has become really involved in AI. Is we had so many students who said, oh, I can just do this now with ChatGPT. We're recognizing that we have an important role to play, how we're advising students and other researchers on how they're applying computational methods when they haven't gone through like the typical like learning and training process. And so the tools that are being provided by them are part of that. And so understanding how we can be really transparent about what automation does to research, what happens when you turn what used to be like a procedure into something that's the push of a button. I see that really closely related to transparency.
Yeah, we were talking about that as everyone was filtering into the room, and about the role of understanding automation in relation to.
I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
can't hear you.
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
There's no microphone.
microphone.
Trying to yell better. Yeah.
Speak a little louder
Yep.
so we can hear you.
Yes, thank
Okay.
you for letting us know.
Yeah. So we are unfortunately without a microphone, but I'd like to turn to Alan Jones, who may not need a microphone. Alan, do you have thoughts on transparency in how AI tools are generating what they're generating and the processes that they're undertaking, particularly with respect to academic environments and the critical importance of this? Maybe we all do need to stand up as we speak. It's awkward.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, I can stand. First, I want to apologize for being late. I was sucked into a whole bunch of XML and lost track of time.
XML is like that.
XML, yeah. So, as we were talking about this before the session, I think for me, the issue is not just about transparency, but it's also about building context. One of the things was very influenced by an article that just came out over TechCrunch, talking about how bad ChatGPT is at math. Can barely solve quadratic equations, much less anything higher than that. And so many times we have students or others, researchers, who are actually using these tools, but the tool is never built for the use case that they're actually bringing to it. There are no signposts that actually say, I suck at math, right? And so what happens is that there's kind of a naive promise that's being made between the querier and the tool that what's coming back is truth, or what's coming back is some kind of truth. Doesn't necessarily matter where it comes from in terms of the trusted information or untrusted information that may or may not be in the LLM, but something comes back. And so one of the things that we've been talking specifically about in the AI panel is, what are the measures of explainability? What are the measures that, if I ask ChatGPT to show its work, or to show me how it actually arrived at that particular decision, I upload an image. How do you know it's a cat? Well, it has 2 ears, it has whiskers, and it has 4 legs. Therefore, this is why I think this is a cat. Those types of, I'm just going to call it this, just pardon the words for it, that type of self-reflection of the process is not something that ChatGPT is actually built to do. Now, it's getting better at it in terms of it's actually showing its sources, but it's not actually talking about the logic that it actually used to get to that particular recommendation. And so we're trying to apply explainability measures to something that just generates text. This is why transparency is so important. Because if you don't know what the tool is actually built for, you may be misusing it without even realizing it. And so that kind of is a long-winded answer in terms of where I think transparency can actually grow in terms of the build of this tool.
Alan, if you don't mind, if we could stick with you for the next
Uh-oh.
question. I'll follow my own instructions and stand up. One of the things that I think a lot of us have heard concern about is the idea that AI may replace our jobs. It may come for jobs of librarians and knowledge workers. And, we've specifically had conversations about this, and you've been very immersed in this question in your own professional environment. And I'm wondering if you can share with us how you think libraries should approach the question of automation and library.
Yeah, no, this is, so how many people are going through union contract negotiations? Okay, I'm probably one of the first people to see this. No AI will replace a librarian language in the collective bargaining agreement. You're all gonna see it. Anybody who has a union, welcome to my world. So the question is, how do you, because in many ways that comes from a lack of education about what AI is actually doing or what it's not doing. But it's also coming from an existential fear of being replaced. And so the problem is, and many of us are so busy looking at the metadata or the tag that was generated rather than asking the question, where is the human supposed to be in this loop? That we're not thinking about those particular knowledge workers and what their roles are going to be when they have AI. It's just been kind of introduced. One of the metaphors that I really like, I was talking to somebody about this. They said we're starting fires, right? Starting fires as in, we're at that place where we're just beginning to build tools. We're just beginning to kind of get an idea of what it is that we can do. But that also creates deforestation. There's all these kind of other kind of adverse effects or adverse things that happen as a result of starting fire. I think we're all in that place, or we're getting into that place, and particularly with those paraprofessionals and others that are going to be disadversely affected. One of my favorite quotes is, AI will not replace libraries. However, it will displace librarians. So as we think about what the change in work is, we have a responsibility as administrators, vendors, as publishers, to take them along for the ride and to give them an idea of where they fit into that cycle. Because the big concern that I kept hearing, particularly from our bargaining unit, was there's no place for us. I mean, literally, that's what somebody said while we were at the bargaining table. Being able to actually have that human communication about using a tool and being able to build that language into a bargaining unit, that's not something that Zebras can do, or it's not something that Clarivate can do. We all have to do that. And so I would say, don't just think about the tool and the really great text or crappy text that comes out of it. Think about how your staff are actually going to be affected or disrupted by this technology.
Lauren, I'm wondering your perspective from the vendor side of where you sit is so at such a level that you're seeing, I think, trends across a number of different areas in the academic sphere.
Yeah. Now, look, this is an important topic. Stand. Next witness.
Right.
Look, I think the way that I want to believe, I believe, and we believe is that this is not a binary yes, no. It's not a zero-sum game. It's not an either or. I think that we're really focusing on the combination. When you put the 1 + 1, what happens? When you put the librarianship and the human and the tool, what can we achieve? And I believe, and I strongly believe, that we can achieve, with the right application, again, there are guardrails that we need to be clear about. That we can achieve better, more value, certainly faster, and also we also approach more people, with services, with library services. So that's kind of the starting point, and I think that while it's probably true that some tasks, certainly some more mundane tasks, but perhaps also some complex tasks, could be done better by machine, in this case, AI, Gen AI. I think we need to think about the following. First of all, I think there is this opportunity that by doing that, it frees up resources, state of mind, priorities to do other things. So we can see the path in which libraries do more and expand their roles, and librarians can do new things and expand their role. They can be much more involved in becoming that center of excellence for, digital literacy in the age of AI, and, become experts in, both identifying tools, managing tools. This is about prompt engineering or prompt design more appropriately, that I think that we can contribute. These are job descriptions that we didn't have a year ago, and I think we'll have more of. So I think there's an opportunity to do more. I think there's a whole area of academic and research integrity is another example where I think, the librarians will be able to do more because we will be able to free up some of the time that is happening, is used today to do some of the other tasks. So I really think that we should think about that in that context. I will just add a couple of, points here. There's this notion of the human in the loop. We in fact just published, excuse me, and I, encourage those of you who are interested in Katina, I think, an article about kind of the concept of the AI in the loop, the human in the middle and AI in the loop, which really talks about that balance between human and AI, and the benefits of getting there. But I really think that humans still have the responsibility to make the right decisions. Certainly governance around what to apply and where to apply it, and also prioritizing what to do and when to do it. And just to use your quote, Alan, I think the other quote that I would like to suggest here is actually, there's a professor at Harvard Business School, I think, who started at Lapini. It's not that AI will replace librarians, it's librarians with AI literacy or knowledge or expertise who may. And that's how I think about that as well. So hopefully that gives you another perspective.
Katie, I just want to add something that Lauren's saying, that we think about AI many times. We think about AI many times as this monolithic thing. It's this monolithic persona. One of the things that, if you've ever heard, has anybody ever heard of Crew AI? No? Crew AI actually allows you to interrogate different types of knowledge bases.
What did you say?
Crew AI, CREWAI. It allows you to actually take different types of persona, right? So you could take a fashion designer, you could take a literature professor, and you could take a chemistry professor, assemble them as persona in a team. And that's something that a student never necessarily had access to be able to do in terms of being able to do multidisciplinary work. And that kind of thinking about, it's not an AI. It could potentially be many types of AI within a single interface. And that kind of one-to-many perspective thing is, from a diversity angle, gigantic. That to me is one of that's the moonshot, is being able to take a particular phenomenon and look at it from multiple perspectives as a student. And so we're at that kind of level right now where we're generating text with a research assistant. It's really more of a research agent than it is a research assistant. But the point is, you can actually, when you think about AI, don't think about AI. Think about AIs and what the potential tasks could actually be in terms of the completion of different types of work and different types of assignments or different types of scholarly communication. The interdisciplinarity of this is something we have hitherto not really understood, and it's something we'll be able to do that we weren't able to do even a year ago.
It's an important point, and I think that really leads directly into the next question that I had for the panel. And Neve, I'm curious to hear from you about the role of librarians in promoting AI literacy, especially as it regards academic integrity. I think this is actually very closely linked to the question of how our jobs will change.
Yeah.
Not to provide you with a leading question, I know there are other angles on it, but
Sure, yeah.
yeah.
Thank you. No, I think that's great. Yeah. So I'll start just, academic integrity is a really broad term. So I'll start by thinking about that from the perspective of students in relation to an academic code of their institution, and what that means for AI literacy. And I think, I hope that maybe we're at kind of like the peak of the kind of the freak out about cheating, and that we're going to kind of come down from that. But it's very present and it's very real for students. So I think that's one of maybe kind of like the first line for librarians to think about, how we can serve our users is how we can be a constructive part of that conversation. So that involves things like making sure we know how they're going to cite AI tools and things like that. And I think you've seen a lot of a renewed interest in just teaching core citation and information literacy skills. So that's good news for our job and for our work. Certainly at our campus, we've had many faculty have said, I can't tell if my students are cheating because they're just so bad at citation anyway. And so we're like, maybe you want to talk to the library. So that's kind of an interesting example of an opportunity. But related to that, there's things like, as we introduce AI research assistants into our library catalogs and databases, we have to be so careful about how we're teaching students to use those tools so that we're not inadvertently putting them in a position where they're violating policies. But that also means that we need to work so closely with faculty, with teaching and learning staff, with members of academic code committees, because often they don't know a lot about the technology. And so we see students are caught in the middle, and there are sometimes they may be accused of violations when they're using the tools that the library put in front of them, or they're told, you can use AI this way and not this way by a faculty member who doesn't really understand what AI does. And the student's like, there's no way I can avoid using AI for the task you've given me because it's in my Google results, or, I'm signed into JSTOR and I'm using the JSTOR beta. So I think that's a really very important role for libraries right now. And I think feeding that information back to our vendor partners is also important. On our campus, students are getting advice about things like, when you draft, don't copy and paste, because if you are accused of a violation, you're going to be asked to show your Google Docs history so we can see where everything came from. So knowing that that's the situation that students are facing, how should that shape the tools that we're providing? That kind of so it's really kind of a two-way street to think about that. So educating our staff partners across the campus, we're working with our writing center to think about how does this impact writing center instructions and things like that. There's so many more conversations that we're having that we weren't having a year ago. So I think, I hope that's good news for the future of our profession as well. The whole, there's the broader research integrity side, which I don't think we have time to dig into, but I think there's a big role for libraries there as well.
I think that your point about how broad this is and how many parts of the institution this really touches and the relationship of the library is an important one to consider. And Oren, I think that leads me to a question for you about what we have seen from our side, from Clarivate, over about a year of implementing this technology. What have we learned and what have you seen on the ground?
Thank you. That's, a year ago, it's interesting, I'm thinking, this has only been a year ago. We started releasing Gen AI in tools such as Research Assistant, Web of Science Research Assistant, an example. So we have now about 12 months of experience. And we certainly see a change, but I'll just say that, there's a significant experience already from implementations. We have, more than 20,000 active users, unique users on Web of Science. We have more than 1,100 institutions have access to Scopus Research Assistant, 800 new Primo activated chose to turn on Primo Research Assistant. So I'm just sharing the scale. So there's quite a significant scale now. And I think, a couple of things that I may want to, kind of mention here is, one is, users are eager, and you see that use and trends are going up. I think many librarians are also, but there's certainly this notion of, building confidence in the tools and building trust. We talked about this, Eve and I, on the way here from another panel, how important it is to build confidence and trust in AI. So, certainly a lot of it has to do about education and, getting to know what exactly is happening. Transparency is an important piece here. I think, for many librarians, I think I started earlier suggesting that our academic AI implementation is such that you don't really use the knowledge base of the language model, but rather the curated, authoritative, the selected content by the library. Even just that piece of education is very helpful to build trust. So we're seeing that growing and getting better, but certainly I think there's more to be done. Another thing I'll mention is that, the discussions around AI, through implementation become a lot more nuanced. A year ago, it was almost assumed that when you talk about AI, you talk about the chat-based discovery. You ask a question in natural language, you get a summarized response or an answer. There are many more use cases. And I think that nuance is much clearer now than it was certainly 12 months ago. So, use cases that span across, discovery, also at the document level and gaining more insights, recommendations, but also facilitating, decision-making, recommendations, for making decisions. Also productivity, we talked about that. So tools to aid librarians to do their job better. So I think that is certainly another piece that we see from implementation. Let me just offer another point that, from the technology perspective that I'd like to mention here as well. One of the decisions, so we made a decision to create what we refer to as an academic AI platform, which is really a centralized platform that provides, that AI services and bring them up to all the products in our portfolio, a range of products in research and in content and in library software. So we have a more of a centralized approach to that. But there are several benefits to that I can talk about, but I would like to mention that's kind of the implementation, what we learned from implementation. One of the architectural design issues that we took early on is to really create what we call open LLM infrastructure, which means that we can, plug in and out, models. We are not married to a specific model. I think this is becoming really, really important and essential as models evolve over time. We always kind of look at the cost, benefit, the value, and the resource consumption that is associated with model when we really try to identify the right model for the right task. So it gives us a lot of flexibility. And that's something, for those of you who are thinking about building, this would certainly be an advice we can give. The other point I'll just make quickly is that I think we'll see LLMs commoditized over time. A lot is being put in develop of different types of LLM. The difference comes from the content, not just from the generative AI capabilities. So certainly another lesson to share. That's
Good stuff. So we are down to our last 5 minutes, and I want to move into the concluding questions we have for our panelists. Alan, we'll start with you, and then we'll move to Lee. In 2 years, where do you think we will be with these conversations? Will AI still be something that's a central topic of conversation at an event like Charleston, in our professional lives, in our field? Or will it be such an integral part of library services in the way that we're working that we won't even have to talk about it anymore?
So I'm going to say, as I'm thinking about this question, I really have kind of three. I have kind of three responses. The first is I see AI being so ubiquitous that we're really going to see it as a service. We're not going to see it as a tool. We're going to basically see it as a component of an ecosystem that is discovery, is inventory management, or something else. They're really simple types of things that AI could do much faster than a librarian could, do you have this particular issue of this journal? Is your serial statement open? There's no reason a librarian has to look at an 866. I'm sorry, but that ship flew a long time ago. I also think that the multi-perspectival thing is something that, as we begin thinking about how to introduce diversity, neurodiversity as well as naming diversity, AI is going to be able to do this much faster than we could ever touch every catalog record within our inventory management system, and it should. And I'm really hoping that we have an opportunity to do that. My fear, and I could talk about this for hours on end, is with kind of the loss of print and the loss of localized content. What Oren has talked about is then a lot of the centralized stuff that's within a particular knowledge base. But we have a lot of this local material that's not in ebook form, that's not necessarily licensed, that as these services get built on top of this digitized text, that means that the ranking of print is going to go lower and lower. So the value that we've actually put into those print materials is actually going to diminish, because nobody goes to the 10th page of a search results in order to find something. And so I'm really concerned about, I think where we're going to be in Charleston is talking about how do we get that material back into the AI survey.
And all this, I mean, I think in 2 years we'll absolutely be talking about this. Like, we're in academia, it moves so slowly. I don't see it in any way that we'll just have this done and done in a couple of years. But I think that's a good thing. I hope that we're still talking about this a lot still in 2 years. And I say that partly because I think this is just like a really fantastic moment for libraries. I think there's so much opportunity to do new things, to form new partnerships, and to, in some cases, to dive into issues that maybe we got wrong the first time through. I think a lot about algorithmic literacy, and we know that's really important. And I just don't feel like we've done a great job as librarians and as a community of finding our place in that and teaching people. And suddenly I see a lot of a renewed interest in this topic, and I see people coming to librarians and going, "Hey, you guys have been kind of talking about this." So to me, I feel like, this is maybe another opportunity to be part of this conversation around what happens with our data. What does it mean that there's bias in our business? And so I think that this is something that will take a long time to dig into and to find where we're going to go with this. But I think that right now is the moment to do that, and I hope that we have a really big window to be thinking about these questions.
Yeah, I happen to agree. I think there's very little that's settled in our professional thinking, and this will probably be one of those things. We have, by my count, 1 minute left in the session. I know you're all very busy at the conference, but we did want to give the opportunity for the audience to ask questions. So I think we will take a question and then send you on your way. Who would like to ask the question?
Right?
Yes, in the front here.
It's nice that you ended on bibliodiversity, because I think that's a really value that's really important to all libraries. But it's interesting that you chose print as the bibliodiversity point, whereas there are so many other points there: small publishers, material that's not digitized, regional material that hasn't got a DOI, so it doesn't have cross-ref metadata. It just goes on and on and on. And actually, the greatest fear I have about generative AI is the source data tending more and more to be aggregated, and makes a less to that diversity. And that's not a question, it's a comment. But
if I could just respond, I'm still smarting from the Second Circuit Court decision from around CDL. So that's part of the reason that I've been thinking so much about print. But you're absolutely right. The smaller publishers, the folks that don't necessarily have the technology or the staff or the infrastructure to participate in those types of aggregators, it's going to be really important to figure out how to involve them and to get them into some of these types of services and streams, particularly around indigenous work and indigenous texts.
that was what I'm particularly thinking about, because scholars of First Nations work are making deliberate choices about not making their work discoverable in certain
I have to say, some of the stuff that's going on in the National Library of Australia is absolutely amazing in this area. They are totally taking the lead at this.
I think, if I may just add another layer here, we shouldn't talk about Gen AI in broad brush. Yes, there will be a lot of holes happening at the chat GPT level. But that's why we as a community need to be more proactive. Hopefully, that's certainly what I think about ourselves, taking the charge back to include that fantastic technology, but applied appropriately to the right set of resources, not to ignore those long tail important resources. I don't think this is not a destiny that's, we're watching, and planning for it to come at us. It's our job to get there and do it properly if we can. There are tools to do it properly. I think this is our job, exactly.
Well, that's a great note to end on, the note of diversity and diverse outlook for the future. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Enjoy the rest of the conference.